Hi everyone, I'm Kyle Dyer and welcome to Colorado Inside Out on this Friday, August 2nd. And while Colorado hit a milestone this week with its 148th birthday, there's concern for our state as we saw wildfires break out every day this week and spread rapidly with the super dry conditions and extreme heat. Thanks to all the teams who are trying their best to save structures, property, and people in the worst of conditions. I'd also like to thank our panel this week, our panel of insiders. Let me introduce you to everybody. We have Patty Calhoun, founder and editor of Westward, along with Krista Kafer, columnist with the Denver Post. Alvina Vasquez, an advocacy leader in Denver and member of the PBS 12 Community Advisory Board. And Sean Walsh, public affairs professional with Sean Walsh Consulting. Last week, we were talking about our bad air quality because of fires from other states. Well, now it's Colorado's turn, unfortunately. There are fires burning from the Front Range to the western slope. And Patty, Governor Polis says the state is, it's an all hands on deck approach. He's called in the Colorado National Guard. Resources are thin, and it's frightening.
Well, 600 of Colorado's firefighters are out fighting other fires. So Polis on Wednesday, when he gave a press conference on this, is calling them back because we need them here. We're not yet at the state where we were back in 2020, which was just one of our worst fire seasons ever. But Polis did cite it on Wednesday and said we could get there again. It's tricky right now. You hope no one celebrating Colorado's birthday failed to blow out the candle, but we don't know what's caused the big four fires burning now. Human error is possible, just like we have the fire in California that's human intent. So we don't know yet, but there are evacuations in Deer Creek Canyon. We have evacuations in Boulder County. Loveland is not contained at all, that fire, so it is going to be a long, hot season. And remember, one of the worst fires ever was the Marshall Fire, and that was at the end of December in 2021. So we cannot let up for months.
And aside from the Front Range, we have fires in Mesa County, Pueblo, San Miguel, Rio Blanco, Delta, Moffett. All over, but the ones here, just the way they've started and spread so quickly, is frightening. Krista.
It is frightening, and I hope for the best for our firefighters. It's a very dangerous job. Our air quality is terrible, but I think we need to take a step back. So fire in pine forest is actually natural, and if we were to roll the clock back over 100 years, we would see smaller fires coming through, burning out the underbrush. Some of these pine trees, particularly ponderosa pine, are resistant. If you have a big tree, it's got fire-resistant bark. They would survive those fires, but then the underbrush and some of the smaller trees would be taken down. And in fact, Native Americans used to use fire throughout the country to thin forests, to kind of take that natural phenomenon to the next step, create habitat, create more meadows, create more scrubland, places where they would see more wildlife. What we've done over the last 100 years, though, is that we have suppressed those natural fires, and these forests have grown very, very dense. And once you get forests that are that dense, you get a far hotter fire. In fact, those fires are so hot that they will take out mature ponderosa pine. We need to get ahead of this and recognize that we've sort of put ourselves here. And by recognizing that fire is natural, small fires are natural, we can go back to the way the ecosystem normally works by thinning these forests, either through controlled burns or through logging, so that we see less dense forests. And then working with people, towns, people who own property, to make sure that they safeguard their assets while still allowing for some level of fire to be part of the natural habitat and the natural ecosystem without us going to these giant fires that are so hard to contain and end up doing ecological damage.
Alvina, your thoughts?
That's hard to follow. That was amazing. But I guess I want to add that when we talk about the extreme heat in Colorado, I think we've all experienced, I grew up here, summer in the 80s is way different than summers today, where it's, multiple days that are very hot and dry. I think the question about climate and the impacts of the polluters in the urban areas, it's not contained. Those damages to our air and to our air quality, it's happening across the state and creating these extreme temperatures. And we can't turn back the clock. We're going to have to find policies to look at cumulative impacts and how opening new oil and gas production is going to affect the already existing oil and gas production and what that has on our environment. I think it's a holistic vision that we need to have about I don't know if it's solving it, but at least trying to not have as much bad fires in the state.
Yes, well, I think it's also important to understand that these fires are being fought in a political context. We have 375 fire departments in the state. 270, about 2/3 of them are funded with property tax. About 1/3 of them are municipal fire departments, like the Denver Fire Department, whose operating funds come out of the general fund. Most of the firefighters in our state, including the ones that are fighting the fires in Jeffco and Boulder, as we sit here, are their salaries, their equipment is paid for with property tax. And I've talked to a mountain fire chief recently who suggested that it may be time to, for the legislature and people who are putting initiatives on the ballot to stop tinkering with property tax. These directly affect these local communities. Now we've got Proposition 108 Initiative 108, Initiative 50 that are looking to be on the ballot this fall that will affect property tax rates. So I think it's if the fires continue this summer, these firefighters will be the poster child for arguments against taking local tax money away from these special districts.
Interesting.
I'm really glad that you brought that up because it has a huge impact in our elections.
Okay. The hot, volatile conditions are words not only used to describe what's happening around us physically, but our emotions and perspectives are all being challenged with the political climate right now. Following the assassination attempt of former President Donald Trump a few weeks ago, there was a lot of talk of unity. And Krista, the division remains. And within the the main two political parties here in Colorado, the infighting continues.
Well, sometimes disunity is a good thing. So we have battles in both parties right now for the souls of those parties. And I'll speak for the Republican Party because I am a Republican, in that we've got half or more of the party that is sort of hooked on Trump, like his ideas, whether it's big spending, big government, protectionism, getting rid of free trade, the kind of cult of personality. Whether the Trump fever ends this November or ends in 4 years, it could go either way, at some point the Republican Party has to go back to its soul. It has to go back to its core values. It has to go back to being the party of ideas, which it was in, say, the Reagan era, even to a degree in the Bush era, where the party stood for things. Whether it would look at the $35 trillion national debt and be aghast and say, let's see if we can fix that. Or looking on the local level and saying, hey, how do we really handle vagrant camps? How do we handle high property taxes? Certainly, I share their concerns about the initiative, but as someone who's now paying a lot more, what do we do about that? What do we do about high taxes? What do we do about, how do we stand by our allies on the national scale? The Republican Party's gotten away from those ideas, clung to a cult of personality, is out calling people names. Whether that ends this November or ends in 4 years, at some point it's got to end. We have to go back to being the party of ideas.
Alvina.
Well, there was news this week that over 500 bills that passed through the legislature were bipartisan bills. So I think that we are still seeing movement and things happening in the state, and people are coming together. I've talked to Republicans that want to work together. They want to govern. They want to be part of a governing system. And unfortunately, part of the party doesn't want that, and they're obstructionists. And we've seen that at the federal level, and now it's trickling down to the local level. So it's disappointing, but I think if there's enough rabble-rousing within the Republican Party, this election will be a defining moment for the direction of that party.
I agree with Krista a little bit, mostly on disunity. It's healthy for the party, but in the maybe December, January range, not when we're getting into August and September and we're still having the difficulties we're having, it really kind of gets in the way of some of the success that might be in the offing. Dave Williams, the chairman of the Colorado Republican Party, earlier this week sent an email to all the people on the email chain, and it was announcing that the state party is going to be coordinating with the Trump campaign and had achieved some recognition nationally, which I think he had to do to kind of take some of the air out of the sails of the people that are trying to get rid of him. But there was no enthusiasm, there was no cheerfulness, there was no call to action, there wasn't even an exclamation point in the email. It was just very perfunctory, which contrasts completely with what's happening on the national level, where Republicans are energized, they expect to win. They came out of a convention Abortion now somehow, abortion was the issue, the argument among the Republican Party. That's kind of just gone by the wayside. So I think, here in the state, we have an apparatus, we have a chairman who, by the way, did get a little bit of a reprieve from a temporary restraining order. The people on the other side have some confidence that that's going to get lifted. But right now, this is not a chairman or a state party that is reflecting confidence.
Patty?
Well, you're in trouble when even Lauren Boebert is not standing up for you, which is what happened with Dave Williams last week when she said, get it together. The infighting in the Republican Party in Colorado is crazy because there are truly, and sorry to use the word crazy, I'm not a crazy cat lady, no cats.
Don't say weird either.
Oh, no weird, no crazy.
Nut job.
Nut job we could have in abundance here. But the Republican Party has had some great people, still has great people, and you think, what do you do to break through so that you can get some control of the party again and bring back the ideas rather than just court actions with nut job emails, with all the different things that are still coming out of the Colorado Party. It's a big problem because they will get some people elected this year. I mean, District 4 is probably going to go for them. Obviously, they'll take 5, but still, you would like to have parties equally balanced with people talking about ideas, not court actions.
So no one mentioned the Democratic Party, which this past week, when we saw Yadira Caraveo kind of side with Republicans regarding whether Kamala Harris did a good job or not at the border, there's still some disagreement within that party, too. It's not just Republicans.
Oh, we'll hear plenty more about that, too.
Okay. On Wednesday this week, a jury was seated in the criminal trial of former Mesa County Clerk Tina Peters. And now the case is being presented. She faces 10 counts for an alleged election security breach. And Alvina, let's start with you. This case, we've talked a lot about at this table. She's probably the state's largest election denier.
I think she was radicalized. I don't think she went into this office with these radical views, unfortunately, which is kind of a good segue from what we were just talking about. It's a tragic story of somebody who went in with really good intentions to hold up our election system, who became radicalized and continues to be supported by the MAGA right. And so, unfortunately, I think it's going to go back to what Patty said. It's going to be a lot of tricks and the Trump playbook of legalese to try to get out of it. But what she did was dangerous when Colorado has the best election system in this country.
Mm-hmm. Sean?
I mean, yet we have another, casualty in the graveyard of people who have worked themselves into a lot of trouble trying to appease Donald Trump. I mean, there's so many layers here, which, by the way, didn't start with the 2020 Dominion machines. Tina was the subject of a recall effort in previously to that. It failed, but it was initiated by 2 staffers that just saw a lot of things going wrong. I mean, clerks are professionals. They take their jobs very seriously. She was not a serious person. It's even questionable whether she even got the required training to be an elected official after getting elected. So there were a lot of problems prior to this. I agree with Alvina. I think she's the victim of grifters that have been kind of drawn to her. These are not the actions of a serious person. Running for Secretary of State after being indicted, trading accusations of lying with a former employee, having 2 employees testifying against her as part of a plea deal. These are not the actions of a serious person. I think the judge is going to throw the book at her here pretty soon.
Well, it certainly was a nostalgic time to think about a few years ago when we were following her fleeing the state with the Pillow Kingdom heir, not Pillow Kingdom, sorry, My Pillow.
My Pillow.
Just the cast of characters who have come through Colorado. Sean brings up a really good point, though, because you have so many county clerks and election officials who are working so hard, not just in this state, across the country, but Colorado is a gold standard. They take their jobs very seriously. They take a lot of grief. They have the grief of Tina Peters reflected on them. People wonder if they can also be corrupted, but we do have a gold standard. Dominion, which is based here, which took so many hits after the 2020 election, none of the reasons that election deniers brought forward, none of them proved true. So we have to remember that Tina Peters will probably get what she deserves here, and the other election officials deserve to be treated with respect.
The thing about conspiracy theories is that, yeah, sometimes people believe in them, sometimes people do become victims. It's another thing to like grab the conspiracy theory football and try to carry it down the field, which is what she tried to do with the Kingdom Pillow, My Pillow guy, right? And the thing about conspiracy theories is that sometimes they are harmless. Sometimes it is all about moon landings and El Chupacabra. Other times, conspiracy theories hurt real people. And whether it's Dominion as a company, the people who were demonized there, also the county clerks and workers who've been put into harm's way, the fact that these institutions are now distrusted. These are real people and real institutions that have been impacted by this conspiracy theory. So anyone who's been involved, whether it's the rioters on January 6th or Tina Peters, anyone who was involved in carrying that crackpot football, to completely mix up my different analogies, I think they have to be held accountable, and I hope that the judge throws the book at her.
And this is all being discussed and rehashed less than 90 some odd days before we all go and vote too, or even vote early. So it's going to be, for people who are reading and following this case, it's going to be fresh on their minds. Problematic behavior isn't just, sadly, with Colorado politicians. There are more problems coming out when it comes to various police agencies in Colorado. Sean, I'm going to start with you here.
Sure. Well, it was very heartrending reading the story about Victor Moses, the cadet that had that very unfortunate incident where it resulted in having to lose both of his legs. That was just such a difficult thing to read. Of course, now he's suing the city and Denver Health. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know how it's going to play, but it might be just kind of, it might turn out to be kind of a workman's comp claim. He did, after all, work there. One thing that people might not know is the city self-insures, which is another term for not having insurance against liability. It's not that's it's been a policy maybe for the last 20 or 25 years. The decision probably was made because the premiums were very high, the payouts back then were very low. But then since George Floyd, we've seen consistently multi-million-dollar payouts that come out of our general fund and are made by our Denver City Council. So instead of an insurance company being a part of it, these cases have a very political nature to them because the plaintiff's attorney know how to play in the Denver Post story, obviously how to position the story. Constituents read that, they contact City Council, and then Council, of course, makes a decision on payouts. So it's a little bit different here in Denver maybe than elsewhere.
Okay, interesting.
Well, probably the most relieved people in town this week were in Aurora because this was a Denver cop problem, not an Aurora cop problem, which we've seen. The story is horrifying. We ran it on Tuesday because this was a recruit. He was black, he had trickle cell anemia, the trait for it, but he passed the physical, and the problem was he went to part of the academy training. He was in the academy, was fight day, where you have to go through, it's really just 8 minutes, a 4-part 8-minute beat up, basically. At one point, there was a mixed martial arts guy who was beating him up, and that was part of the procedure. The Denver Health paramedics who were there didn't stop it. And in fact, he was unconscious at a certain point, wound up in the hospital for 4 months, lost his legs. Just a horrifying story, but it's part of police procedure. And that's one of the things we need to look at. Do we really need this kind of a hazing ritual in order to create good police officers?
Yeah. Worth a discussion for sure at the city level.
There are a lot of great officers putting their life on the line to keep us safe. Even so, I think it's important that we point out scandals, ways that departments have come up short. And so I'm actually going to throw a log on the fire as far as fuel for our conversation. A couple years ago, my uncle was hit by drunk drivers in a car. They know who these people are. Those people are still free. My uncle is not the only bicyclist to be hit by reckless drivers who are still free. I think dozens of his bones were broken. He's lucky to be alive. He's lucky to be walking. And he's not the only one. These kinds of crimes, I guess, get to be in the to-do later pile. So I would like to see some of the to-do later pile, other victims. These aren't high-profile murder victims here. but these are people whose lives were nearly destroyed by people who are often known in the community. I would urge the departments, hit that stack of to-do laters because people are still suffering.
Okay. Sorry about that. Alvina?
I think it's a continued conversation about the accountability within law enforcement. And now what we're seeing is within their own procedures, obviously. They like to lean on, well, that's our standard procedure a lot, but we continue to see failures of those procedures. We also, because of this recent scandal with Susan Massey, is these bad cops being shifted around from city to city, and nobody's shutting the door in their face and saying, you don't represent us and you don't represent our values and we don't want you here. We need accountability in all levels of law enforcement.
This week, in the last week or so, there have been a lot of stories about the RTD police chief as well, who is on leave right now because he drove very, very, very fast in a company vehicle. We're hearing about the Lakeside former police chief who was selling cars. Is that right, Alvina?
Yeah, what's interesting about Lakeside is, and Sean, you probably know this, it's a tiny little police department.
That's right.
And they basically collect taxes from people speeding down Sheridan to run the city because it's such a small.
And bust people in the parking lot for drinking beer at Lakeside.
Yeah, it's like 2 or 3 blocks of Denver, right, within the Jefferson County, Denver kind of line. So it's an interesting thing, but it's also consolidated power among like 5 people because it's such a small, tiny little part of the city.
Well, the focus is on them now, no matter how big or small.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about some of the highs and lows of this week. And I'm going to start with Patty with the negative because we want to end on a positive note, please, this week.
Well, I do love the Lakeside story. The police chief and his daughter, who is the town clerk, basically, they had a car swapping deal. They'd buy used police cars that were supposed to be for the force, which actually is pretty large. The police force is about as large as the population in Lakeside because they have to patrol the shopping center and also the amusement park. But so they were selling them on the open market for a lot more money. That was bad. But the RTD police chief, you love it that he's driving more than 100 miles an hour when meanwhile the biggest problem, well, one of the big problems with RTD is the light rail trains are going 10 miles an hour and people can't get to work. So can we just average the speeds together and have a working transit system?
It is ironic.
My shame of the day, shame of really the year, maybe the decade, is that those people who made it okay for boys to compete or men to compete against women in professional sports. And I'm talking specifically about Angela Carini, a top boxer, female boxer in her field, beaten this week by a man living as a woman. So whoever made that possible for men to beat women and for it to be okay, shame on them.
You know, watching these fires continue to be, I think, we talk about the traumas that this state holds. These mass casualty events from, obviously shootings that we've experienced, but also the fires, watching families have to gather their things. I know, Kyle, as a reporter, you all experience so much trauma on the sidelines that you have to carry with you. So much respect to those that have to cover it and be there and try to help these families come together.
Yeah, it is tough to watch all that unfold. Yeah.
Well, on behalf of all word nerds out there, can we please be more careful next time we use the word existential? Whether you're describing the climate or maybe a presidential candidate, it's going to be a long 4 months of hyperbole from pundits and politicians. Let's just maybe look up the word before we repeat it.
Do you have another word or a couple that would be good?
Dire.
Okay, I'll remember that. All right.
That was
Let's start about something positive.
We lost a great Denverite just last month, Judge Larry Boning. He was a great jurist, really a wonderful person, but also just fun. He participated in Colorado history, performances. He played Reverend No at Christmas. He loved this city. He loved the history of this city, loved the people of this city. So it is a sadder town without Judge Larry Boning.
Okay.
I'm going to give it to a small business called Off the Bottle. It's like 12th and Broadway, and it's not the only business of its kind where you can actually get sustainable products with a lot less packaging, and where you can actually reuse stuff, bring a container back in and get a refill. Because as we all know, the fact that we don't have a sustainable lifestyle in this country, it is an existential threat.
Okay. All right.
I think it's great to be watching the Olympics. I mean, Colorado's the home of the Olympics, and to be a part of history and patriotism this week. And after such a challenging couple months in our political system, it's awesome to feel patriotic.
Next week, too. All right, Sean.
Next Tuesday is National Night Out, which is a great platform for people to get out in the communities. It was started mostly by law enforcement to strengthen relationship with neighbors. So if there is a National Night Out near you, get out and introduce yourself to somebody you don't know.
Oh, that's great. Okay. My high, or should I say my high five, is to all the firefighters from all over the state who are coming and working together to protect and save Colorado communities. But also thanks to the people who are jumping in to help at evacuation centers, and also those people who don't live anywhere near a fire but are getting their horse trailers and driving to help animals who are stranded and need rescue. I just hope that the rain comes soon, but I hope this where we're seeing this empathy and this coming togetherness here in Colorado sticks past this initial run of fires, because we're probably in for it for several more months. We could have them through the end of the year. So let's keep focusing on each other. Thank you, Insiders, for joining us this week. We appreciate it. Thank you for watching or listening to our podcast. We appreciate it so much. I am Kyle Dyer. I will see you next week here on PBS 12. Stay safe, Colorado.
PBS 12 believes in the power of original, local programming. Help us bring more shows, like the one you just watched, by donating at pbs12.org/program support today.